Don Stapley is the head of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. 3 years ago, in 2007, he began asking questions about money being used by Sheriff Joe Arpaio, specifically money being used to send sheriff's deputies to a resort in Honduras. Then, out of the blue, he was under criminal investigation by the sheriff.
You're telling me anybody who gets in this guy's way,
anybody who ruled against him, anybody who disagreed with anything he had to say became a criminal target and were criminally investigated.
A year later, Mary Rose Wilcox, also a county board supervisor, was the lone voice against funding the sheriff's popular illegal immigration raids. Then she, too, was under a criminal investigation by the sheriff.
He tried to put you in prison.
He indicted me and 44 felony counts. I was devastated.
I know this is the West, but this sounds like the old Wild West,
well,
where the sheriff
that
is the supreme law.
Said. He has forgotten that the United States Constitution, and we are ruled by the rule of law, which he has just thrown out the window.
And when the county's budget director, Sandy Wilson, tried to enforce countywide budget cuts on the sheriff's department, she, too, had sheriff's investigators knocking on her door.
Who would have believed that the way they would go about stopping us from doing our job would have been to go against individuals within my office, myself included, the county manager, criminally.
Many here say behind the scenes, the beloved tough sheriff, Joe Arpaio, opens investigations, sends out his deputies against politicians, judges, mayors, even civil servants, anyone who gets in his way. The sheriff's office says the investigations are all legitimate, that investigators had probable cause and a duty to investigate. Others call it intimidation and abuse of power. Here's why. Don Stapley actually faced 2 Sheriff's Department investigations, 118 counts in all. He was handcuffed, put in jail. It was a painful ordeal, but all of it was dismissed. His defense cost him personally more than $1.5 million. When Mary Rose Wilcox got into court, every charge against her, all 44, thrown out. And grand jury records released this year show an investigation launched against County Budget Director Sandy Wilson ended because the grand jury said there was no case. Paul Charlton is a former U.S. attorney for Arizona. He's now in private practice and represents Don Stapley.
If I believe it to be true, the abuse of authority is when you mess with my budget, when you mess with my issues, I'm going to look into your past. There might be no evidence of a crime that occurred, but I'm going to bring charges against you anyway?
That's exactly right, and I take it a step further. If you're a judge who's sitting on a case that I have and you rule against me, that very ruling can be evidence of a crime and you will be charged, and that's exactly what happened to one of our sitting criminal judges here.
And that is also true. A sitting judge who ruled against Sheriff Arpaio in multiple cases was then investigated by the sheriff for bribery. And once again, the case was thrown out. No evidence. But now the investigations have turned on the sheriff himself. A federal probe begun 2 years ago has now moved to a grand jury here, investigating whether this toughest sheriff in America has been abusing his power. Confirmed by some who have been called to testify, the investigation focuses on the sheriff, his chief deputy, and a former county attorney, and whether they use their powers to attack political opponents. We thought with allegations like those made against this outspoken sheriff, we'd be hearing from the sheriff himself. But instead, when we got to the sheriff's department, we were brought into a room, met by the sheriff's PR person, a budget director, and an interim deputy chief, who tried to answer for a sheriff who was a no-show.
I just don't understand why suddenly Joe Arpaio has sent out you 3 people, basically, this is nervous, to face this kind of media scrutiny and these kind of questions. This toughest sheriff in America, right?
He is the toughest sheriff, and he's a good sheriff, and I know that if he could be here, he would be here. But when you've got legal counsel advising you not to speak because you're a potential witness in a number of these investigations, he's got to default to what his attorneys say.
The problem is none of these people the sheriff sent to talk to us say they had anything to do with the political investigations the sheriff is accused of conducting. Jerry Sheridan is the interim chief deputy.
Well, Jerry, did he abuse his power? Did he send out underlings to investigate political opponents, to destroy their careers?
Absolutely not.
You were involved in those decisions?
No, I was not.
So do you know what kind of...
I've been here for 32 years, and I know the inner workings of the office. The sheriff was not involved in any of those mischievous things that he's been accused of.
But in the case of County Supervisor Don Stapley, the sheriff is not done. Even though all 118 counts against Stapley were thrown out, Sheriff Arpaio is appealing.
It's unbelievable. It's the kind of thing you wouldn't think could even happen in the United States of America in the 21st century.
The grand jury now investigating the sheriff could report its findings any day. Whether this sheriff, acclaimed for being tough, went too far. Drew Griffin, CNN, Phoenix.